welcome everyone to ThursdAI. Let's start. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to ThursdAI, May 9th. It's May 9th. It's crazy. We're getting very close to most of the year being behind us, or at least the first part. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with Weights and Biases. I'm very happy to be here with you again on this ThursdAI, because we have a bunch of stuff to talk about. As always, there's never a quiet week in AI, and I'm joined here by my co-host Nistan. I'm probably gonna have a few more co-hosts. Nistan, how are you, brother?
Hey, just trying to get more sleep this week.
Yeah, this week you may need this, because if anything about this week, there's a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about, and I'll introduce my co-panelists in a second. But before that, I will just say that this week does feel a little bit like the week to catch up on sleep before next week, because next week feels to me like it's going to be crazy. And we'll talk about why in a second. So welcome, Nistan. I want to also say hi to a frequent co-panelist already at this point, Wolfram Ravenwolf. What's up, Wolfram?
Hey, thank you. Nice to be here again, and looking forward to a great show again. Have fun, everyone.
Awesome. And now I want to introduce two new folks to the stage. We have Graham and we have Xingyao, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but feel free to unmute yourself and say welcome and just introduce yourself, because this is your first time here.
Hi, I'm Graham. I'm happy to be here. I'm an associate professor at Carnegie Mellon University and one of the co-leads of the Open Devin project.
I was just saying, well, let's effing go.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Xingyao. I'm currently a second-year PhD student at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign doing computer science, and I'm also like a core contributor to Open Devin, so excited to see.
And welcome, folks. Welcome, Xingyao. Welcome, Graham. And the reason why you're here is because this week you guys had an awesome announcement, which we'll cover in a second. And I love speaking with the folks who made the news, and you guys are two of the folks. And obviously, the additional thing to mention here is that Xingyao, or Justin Lin from the Quen team, is also part of the Open Devin kind of endeavor, and he connected us. So thank you for coming. And he can't be here because he's flying. But shout out, we're gonna mention some Quen stuff as well. So with this, I think the way we usually start the show is I'm running breathless through like a TLDR of everything we are going to talk about. And this way you'll know all the exciting stuff up front. And if you want to stay for the conversation, you're more than welcome to. And let's start with the TLDR, and then we'll dive into, I think our first chat is going to be with our friends from Open Devin. How's it going, everyone? This is a TLDR, a recap of everything we've covered on ThursdAI for March 9th, and we had a great show with multiple guests, and so I'm going to try and run through all of the conversations and guests and topics that we had. So if you're just joining us, this is a recap for you, basically. We started our show with a conversation with two folks from Open Devin. Open Devin recently get state-of-the-art in a benchmark called SWE-Bench, which is a very hard benchmark that actually takes GitHub issues and tries to solve them and actually verify them. So we had a chat with Xingyao, Wang, and Graham Neubig from a project called Open Devin, which co-host of the pod, Junyan Ling from Quen, is opened, and now there's like a bunch of collaborations, and it's a 2-month-old open source endeavor that now beats companies Devin Cognition Labs, I think, $2 billion valuation. It beats their score with open source tools, and it's quite awesome to see. So that conversation was really awesome about their approach, about Code Act and Open Devin. So definitely give this a conversation and listen.
And when files open, you can scroll down or scroll up so the agent can see different parts of the file. And then I think the most important thing is like they have a search directory command, where, for example, if the issue mentions like several function name, they can just try to search for exact match of those function names.
I always love is that the authors of the stuff we talk about actually come and talk about this on ThursdAI. So please, more of that. We also covered the new transformer alternative resurgence of XLSTM. LSTM stands for long shorter memory, and then XLSTM is for extended. And it remains to be seen whether or not this is an alternative to transformers, but definitely got the excitement of many of the ML folks and researchers on my timeline. So check this out. We then covered DeepSeek version 2, and DeepSeek is a crack team, very, very sharp team from China that releases incredible models. Still, DeepSeek Coder is probably one of the best coder models that you can run open source. We've talked about how it's super cheap at 28 cents per million tokens, and how it comes to close to GPT-4 or even surpass GPT-4 in different things. And you can download the model. It's 128,000 tokens in the context window, and it's a huge mixture of experts. I think it's the biggest mixture of experts we've seen, with 236 billion parameters and 160 experts, or some crazy amount like this, with 6 experts activated at each forward pass. So very interesting approach, and they shared a lot of technical detail as well. And they're now sitting comfortably at almost 80 in MMLU score, which is very high. But considering the amount of activated parameters for enterprises and considering the amount of compute this requires, is a very appealing model for many folks. We also talked about a chunker 120 billion parameter merge of Llama 3 from Maxime Lebon, friend of the pod, and how very interesting it is that you can merge a model without further training and get different behaviors. For example, this 120B is very good at creative writing, better than the base 70 billion parameter model. But also we've talked about how there's emergent properties of this insanity, and some of this could be attributed to the high quantization that we've had. But definitely a very interesting conversation about how merging of layers on top of the same model without continued training creates a very interesting model. I actually read out some very interesting results from this model. Definitely listen to this conversation. And then we also in the open source covered that weights and biases is in the news this week, and not because I put them there. And OpenUI from weights and biases is now top trending repo in TypeScript, and like top 5 or top 7 in top trending overall. It's called OpenUI, and we had a conversation at the end of the pod with Chris Van Pelt, who is the CIO and co-founder of Weights and Biases, who did OpenUI as a side project, and now it's a whole thing. OpenUI lets you create UI elements with just text, or if you want to paste an image, it will use GPT-4 Vision. And that conversation with Chris is really interesting.
Naming things is really hard. Originally, I was going to call it LMint, like you're minting elements, but I just didn't like that name enough. And then I thought, wait, OpenUI, I like that name. Maybe I can ride on the coattails of OpenAI's success a little bit. But yeah, I've been blown away by the community's response to the project. And I think we've got about 12,000 stars today, it's just nuts. And
shout out to Chris for building this and everybody who tried this. In our segment about benchmarks and evals, we've updated that Llama 3 is still in the 6th place. And also LMsys released an analysis blog, an in-depth analysis blog that I'll add to the show notes about what type of prompts are people testing on Llama and which types it wins. And it looks like it wins in data processing. And as prompts get harder, Llama's win rate drops again top tier. So very interesting analysis from them. We also mentioned the Reka core from our friends at Reka AI in Singapore, Yi and Max and Piotr and some other friends who've been on the pod a couple of times. Last week, actually, we talked about Vibes eval from Reka. The Reka core now placed a 7th place on LMsys Arena, which is super cool. And other friends from Alibaba, Quen Max is now breaks top 10 as well. So some Arena updates there for you. And there's no updates in the OpenLLM leaderboard on Hugging Face. In the big companies and APIs, we had the awesome pleasure of having Tanishq Abraham from Medark and also Parmita, who's in this field, to talk about the incredible announcement from DeepMind and Isomorphic Labs called AlphaFold 3 and what this entails and what are like interesting diffusion models they use in AlphaFold there. Very big announcement, and Parm actually used the AlphaFold server that they released for researchers for free to use this model. And we also talked about how open source community is cracked and is also already picking up the code behind this, because AlphaFold 3 was not open sourced from Google. And then we talked about a bunch of stuff from OpenAI, including their 2 new models on LMsys Arena. One is called I'm a good GPT-2 chatbot, and the other one is I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot. And we talked about that we now have confirmation that these models came from OpenAI based on not only vibes, but also not only tokenizer, but also like error messages. We've talked about what these models mean and how they play into the kind of the OpenAI. We did have some speculations about what these models are, whether it's 4.5 or etc. And I think the summary there is we will all be disappointed if this is GPT-5, but we'll all be very impressed if these are like very small models like GPT-2 level models that now are given this level of performance. And the last speculation about this is that potentially we'll see something from OpenAI coming close to next week's Google I/O. We also talked with Wolfram Ravenwolf, our kind of model reviewer extraordinaire in-house, about OpenAI publishing their model spec.
Yeah, so the first thing is that they actually opened up the spec and showed it to people. That is an open move from OpenAI, so I appreciate that a lot, that they want actual conversation about it. And I think it may be inspired or at least goes in the direction that Claude did with the constitution principles.
And we've talked about the renewed hierarchy of who the model should listen to, and the model should do like helpful things and don't respond with NSFW stuff and not safe for work stuff. And also that they're taking feedback. There's actually a feedback form that you can read through the spec and tell them like, hey, actually, no, this is not that good. We also talked about a bunch of stuff of OpenAI this week, even though no new models, is that they joined the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity for deepfake analysis. And they said they built a classifier that they claim has 98% detection rate for DALL-E images and 0.1% for non-AI generated images. So they have a classifier to detect if AI images are there. Obviously, it's not perfect, and also metadata can be strict, but this classifier is a very interesting approach. They also said that they started watermarking SOTA and the unreleased voice engine from OpenAI as well. We barely mentioned this, but Microsoft also rumored to have a 500 billion parameter model in training called MAI-1. And likely this is the folks from Inflection, Mustafa Suleimani and Karen Simonyan and some other folks. So there's a rumor and very interesting outcomes of this, that Microsoft is an investor in OpenAI, but also Microsoft is now working on their own like huge model, 500 billion parameter model, which was to be expected when Mustafa Suleimani went over Microsoft, as some of the core Inflection team as well. In the voice and audio category, we've talked about Udio, the AI music backed by A16Z startup. Adds in-painting is the ability to change parts of songs and different lyrics and reword some lyrics, which is super cool, and you definitely should give it a try. And the AI art and diffusion area, we've talked about ByteDance Pulit, which is a new version, high-quality version of ID customization. Basically, a way for you to transfer your face or somebody else's face on top of AI-generated art, which previously required a lot of training, and this is a tuning-free approach. Basically, it works with a few steps, and you can try this on Hugging Face right now, and it runs super quick, and it's really funny to see your face on AI-generated art if you haven't done this. And if you're into this, it's now supported in Comfy UI as well. And at the end, I basically covered my trip to the museum with my kids using the Rabbit R1. So if you're interested in hearing even more thoughts about Rabbit R1, definitely give this a shout. And also, Nisten shouted out our friends at Alignment Labs releasing a 31 million data set for training models and fine-tuning models, which is super cool. I think they also released a few models trained on this data set. So shout out to Alignment Labs, our friend, for this massive effort. Let's get started with open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. Hey folks, this is ThursdAI, and we're in the open source corner, the corner that we're probably going to spend most of the time this week at. And I think at the start of it, I want to just say hi to a few friends of ours, the new joiners here. So we have Xingyao and we have Graham, and they already introduced themselves, and they are parts of the Open Devin team. And you guys have some news this week. So Xingyao, would you take the honors of announcing what is the news we're going to talk about here? And then let's talk about Open Devin.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think for our announcement this week, we were basically saying we actually built a Codec 1.0 agent where we achieved 21% result rate unassisted on the SWE-Bench like subsets of the SWE-Bench benchmark. And then we are kind of like working on a new streamlined evaluation to make it easier for everybody to evaluate their own agent. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned a few things here that I would like to chat about as well. And I want to maybe have Graham, maybe can you break down like SWE-Bench very briefly for folks who never heard about this before?
Yeah, sure. So SWE-Bench is a really nice benchmark created by people at Princeton. And basically the way it works is they harvested a whole bunch of issues from GitHub along with the patches that fixed the issues and unit tests that passed after the issue was fixed. And they created this into a big benchmark of about 2,200 of these issues. And the idea is that if we are able to resolve all of these issues, that will be a big step forward towards AI for software development, because we could just write down what's the problem with our code and AI could go in and fix it. This is really hard because these are like real life issues that real life developers had to fix. And so it requires you to go in and look at and understand the whole code base, fix something correctly, sometimes run code to make sure that it works. And if it doesn't work, go in and fix things. And we tested specifically on a smaller subset of that called SWE-Bench Lite, which is about 300 issues. The main reason for this is because the full data set costs a lot of money to run on, so we did it on the smaller one. But nonetheless, this is pretty representative of the full data set.
Speaking of a lot of money to run on, could you start maybe with the models that you use for Open Devin? Is it GPT-4? Like,
Xingyao, you want to take that?
Yeah, Xingyao, can you?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I think we are using the same one that Sweet Agent was using. I think it's like GPT-4 11.04 or something preview. And then we actually tried the latest version of the GPT-4. It's like 2024. I don't remember, like 2024 04 or something. And then we actually tried that one, and that one actually did not really outperform like the previous one, like the preview one. So I think the latest GPT-4 Turbo actually performed around like 17% or ish.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's very interesting that you have to take into account kind of the actual score itself. And they will probably have to keep updating and re-releasing. Yeah, but it makes sense. So you're saying like the full SWE-Bench takes a lot of money to actually evaluate. Maybe some folks who are listening to this from OpenAI can contribute some credits to the folks at Open Devin to be able to run the full suite. Let's talk about maybe Open Devin before we get to Kodak and how you guys achieve the score specifically. Could you? So we briefly mentioned Open Devin, but would one of you volunteer to explain Open Devin as a concept, and where the state of currently of Open Devin is? We always said we're going to talk about Open Devin with the folks when there's going to be an announcement to make, and now you actually have an announcement. Graham, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take this one and let Xingyao talk about Kodak. So Open Devin, basically when Devin came out, which I think a lot of people have seen, Devin is an AI software engineer that goes in and writes code for you and stuff like this. And when we saw it, a lot of people were like, oh, this is, a really exciting development, but it's closed source. And we'd like to also be able to do similar things with an open source toolkit. So it started from that genesis. Xingyao from the Quen team started it out with a README in a repo that said, let's make something cool like Devin. That README got about 1,000 stars immediately, which kind of indicated that a lot of people were interested in this. So I made a really simple kind of mocked up front end and pushed it that night. And then after that, we've had this huge open source community of people who pitched in to make it a little better, a little at a time. And we started doing that about 8 weeks ago. And I think right now we've started to reach the point where it's really useful and usable. And in order to get there, some of the things that we had to do were we had to create a sandbox where agents could do software development tasks. That is to prevent it from running on your computer and then the software accidentally kills some of your programs or deletes your home directory or something like that. So all of this stuff is running in kind of Docker containers to keep everything safe. We've also added things like a web browser that can look up information on the web, agents. So we have an agent hub where you can put in a whole bunch of agents. And we also have things like kind of the full agent, like the one that...
He might have gotten a call.
Yeah.
Maybe by his real life agent.
Maybe the phone agent crashed. Xingyao, you want to...
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. We have a bunch of micro agents that do specific tasks. And then after that, we also just added evaluation very recently. We added this better agent that Xingyao created very recently. So now we have the full suite of sandboxing, evaluation, a bunch of agents that you can use. So it's good both for, and we have a UI. So it's good both for users who might want to use agents through the UI and people who are agent developers who want to go in and make better agents. So that's it in a nutshell. Graham. It's a lot of work.
You did mention a bunch of stuff that I do want to dig into a little bit. I think we've mentioned Devin multiple times on the show. Obviously, at least to me, Devin is like a thing that broke through kind of the bubble of ours, because like friends of mine who don't follow as close as we are, like texting me, yeah, Devin can solve this. And I'm like, I don't know if you know what you're talking about. But also, Cognition Labs, I think, recently announced like a $2 billion valuation for a 6-month-old startup. This tracks with the amount of attention that the Xingyao or Justin's like original tweet also got. So thank you for the brief history of this. Devin, I think one of the differences that I saw at least was the UI, the kind of the access to the browser, the access to its own shell. They have this like tractable way of seeing what it did before. Could you briefly maybe cover some of the UI stuff that you've built for Devin to support some of those for Open Devin?
Yeah, for sure. And at least the backend, what we have now actually isn't inspired by the Devin backend at all, because we don't know what they're doing in the backend. But the front end was definitely very heavily inspired by the kind of stuff that they did, because we were able to see it. And we have, a chat menu like you saw in Devin. We have file browser. We have a command line where you can see the commands it's running. We have a web browser where you can see web things. One thing that we don't have right now is a planner, because our current agents don't really use an explicit planner like the one in Devin did, although that might change in the future. But overall, I think the front-end experience is pretty similar.
Awesome. All right. And then I want to turn the page into Kodak. And Xingyao, maybe you can because this is something you worked in before Open Devin, right? So could you give us a brief review of Kodak?
Well, I think previously, when people speaking of LM agents, people were thinking, okay, you basically provide a list of tools to the large language model, and then you force it to generate JSONs, where, for example, a key is like the tool name, and another key is for like the argument name. And then that was like the standard. And I think Kodak was trying to advocate for a different type of agent environment interfaces, in a sense that it basically directly generates executable code as action, and then execute that action, you get this so-called observation from the environment. So there are a lot of advantages. I think we all know now large language model today, they are sort of optimized for code training. So basically they see a lot of code during their pre-training. They are pretty familiar with the syntax of, for example, like Bash and Python, etc. And then there's a lot of the other advantages, for example, the flexibility of code, which means you can easily compose, for example, you can easily compose multiple batch commands together to do something that's really complex, etc. So basically we were saying we were basically trying to include this framework into Open Devin so that the agent can directly interface with the sandbox and basically do everything, whatever they want with the sandbox without any constraint of action parsing, which you need for JSON or basically text action.
Could you give an example of? Oh, thank you. By the way, could you give an example of this interface? I think you outlined some in the release, but you have different actions like searching a code and creating a file. Could you give a few examples of those? They're not built into the LLM knowledge that you guys have to teach it basically.
Oh yeah, so basically, yeah, exactly. So I think beyond the tools LLM can directly use from Bash and Python, we were basically heavily inspired by SWE agent, and we basically reuse some parts of their Bash script and then create an additional set of Bash command where the agent can use. It's like a not interactive file editor sort of thing that the agent can use in the Bash command line to edit file, to open file. And when files open, you can scroll down or scroll up so the agent can see different parts of the file. And then I think the most important thing is they have a search directory command, where, for example, if the issue mentions several function name, they can just try to search for an exact match of those function name and basically return to the agent a list of file, which the agent can then cd into the folder and open the file and check the issue, something like that.
That's awesome. So one question that I immediately have is that I think, Graham, you mentioned understanding the whole code base is one part of why these tasks are more complex, because it's not only just one file, right? You have to understand the connections between. Do you guys do any type of embedding on some of the code or the code base or some other files as well? Something like Cursor does, I think. Do you have any insights into how to use other files from the one that people are working on?
Yeah, we actually don't do anything like that right now, although I think it would be excellent to do something like that. And actually, one of the things I really like about the Codact framework is all of this can be written in code, which means we can write up a code search Python script or Bash script and just add it as a tool to the toolbox. So we deliberately named our agent Codact 1.0 because it's like the first version of the Codact agent that we created, but I think over the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to be doing a lot of engineering on the tools we give to the agent, and that would make it better and better at improving pretty quickly.
That's awesome. And obviously, like getting SOTA on SWE-Bench, we've seen and we've covered a few of those. So the folks who came out with SWE-Bench also came out with SWE Agent, which is their agent. I think you said Princeton, right? So Ophir Press and some other folks. And they achieved like a certain score that you guys beat as well. And then we also saw Auto Code Rover, we've talked about as well, getting a certain also state of the art. So now you guys hold this, and probably likely some folks will come up with different approaches. How does this translate to actual real life support of developers who would use this for something like a code assistant? Could you speak to the application of this? Do you guys use Open Devin Codact to work on the Open Devin Codact? Because the joke is the Devin folks are still hiring human like software engineers, etc. Could you speak to that a little bit? The practical aspect of using Open Devin?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We actually have started using Open Devin to code Open Devin. So Robert, the other co-lead of the project, he used it to create like Bash script splitter, which was necessary to improve our sandbox. So we have at least one positive example. I did one positive example where I fixed a typo, but that doesn't really count, and that was with our older agent. Now that we have a good agent, I think we really will be able to start moving into using it to improve. Open Devin's a kind of complex code base. It has Docker containers and all kinds of stuff like this. Those, I think, were the worst case scenario for an automatic coding agent, honestly, but overall, I think we can improve it. One other thing I'd like to mention is I think the SOTA will be improved, and we really want to work together with people in the academic or agent builder community to, when they do good research, we'd like to pull it into Open Devin so other people can use it immediately. Like users can always be using the best open source agent that's available. So that's another way we want to interact with all the people who are going to be building these things.
I love it. That's awesome. And Graham, I know you have a little bit of a time thing. Thank you, folks, for coming. One last thing, maybe Xingyao, you can take this one, is how can folks use Open Devin right now? How can they participate in maybe a pull request or the community and everything else that you want to say on stage here? The stage is yours before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah, thanks. So I think right now, like you can just go to Open Devin GitHub. There's like documentation, and you just go into the documentation. There's like a one-line Docker command you can directly run to basically start Open Devin on your Mac OS laptop, or for example, Linux machine or Microsoft WSL. And then regarding how to contribute, we have a contribution guideline on our README. So basically, we track everything we want to do with a sort of like priority roadmap. And then we have a bunch of GitHub issues labeled as, for example, good first issues, and we have some feature requests. If people are interested, feel free to look at those issues and feel free to submit a PR and implement it. We basically track everything on GitHub. And we also welcome people to join our Slack channel and Discord channel for further discussion. I think Slack channel are like more dev focused in a sense.
Awesome. So thank you, folks, for coming. I do have one last follow-up question, like super quick. Do you use any observability in there? Like how, when Open Devin runs and creates different prompts and calls LLMs, how can developers know what it actually did? Do you use any observability or at all?
Yeah, so basically, if you're referring to what exactly the model did, is we basically, on the back end, we have a log, basically print out all the command the agent runs and all the observation, for example, the agent received from the sandbox, if that's what you're referring to?
No, just the LLM calls to like OpenAI, if those are logged and all the prompts and the outputs, etc.
Yeah, exactly. That's essentially the thing I was talking about. Basically, the action and the observation are these things that we send to OpenAI. And basically, you can also access it programmatically within each agent. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I know. Graham, go ahead. I saw you on mute if you want to comment to this.
Yeah, and actually, this is something that we don't have now, but having a way to log that to a front end like weights and biases would actually be awesome. So we don't have that as an issue, but we could add that, and I think that'd be really helpful because looking through the log files is a pain.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing that you said this because we have a new tool specifically for this called Weave, and I don't often plug this, but I am DevRel in charge of the Weave programmatic. So I'll definitely be opening up a pull request and testing this out because it's very easy to get started wrapping, and we have like support from OpenAI built in the box. So basically just like one line, and folks can actually start and see what their Open Devin did. So folks, I really appreciate your time here. Kudos on the state-of-the-art achievement on this very hard SWE-Bench, and really appreciate your time here. We need to move on because we have other topics. Feel free to stick around if you can, and we're moving on in open source because we have a bunch of stuff to talk about.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And you guys just heard from the maintainers of Open Devin, and now we're moving into other models that we need to talk about. So DeepSeek V2, which is an incredibly big sized MOE, was released by the folks from DeepSeek. Very interestingly, it saves a lot of the training costs. So they claim to get like 42.5% decrease in training costs versus DeepSeek V2 and KV cache reduction to 93%. And I think the folks at DeepSeek are doing like amazing things. We've seen other DeepSeek models before. I think DeepSeek Coder, Nishra, wasn't DeepSeek Coder like one of the best coders for a long time as well?
Yeah, it still is.
Oh, it still
DeepSeek 67, yeah.
Yeah. And so now they released like an MOE. I think this is the first MOE, mixture of experts model from DeepSeek with an insane 236 billion parameters. And everybody who releases an MOE, they want to tell you how small it is actually. So everybody is following up and saying, oh, it's only whatever active parameters. So this one is 21 billion active parameters. The interesting thing that I saw about DeepSeek, it activates not 2 experts per forward pass, it activates 6. Which is new. Any thoughts on DeepSeek, like super quick from what you potentially saw?
Yeah, the most interesting part is how they save a lot on the context size. I have used it. I have not tested the memory and speed. I've used it through their site. And yeah, it is 128K context. And it uses all 6 experts at once. And this is a very good improvement on an architecture that they had already released before. There was some work done with a 4 expert with Llama 8B using the DeepSeek architecture, and that model is performing really well at 30B. Yeah, they're pretty next level when it comes to this stuff. And not only that, but they're also very sharing of what they do, and this empowers them even further.
Yeah, the technical reports from DeepSeek is like incredible. That I hear this from everyone. Let's talk about a little bit about the benches. So on human eval, it achieves like 81.1, where GPT Turbo 1106, which is I think the one that the folks from Open Devin also mentioned, it gets 82.2. So like very close to GPT-4 Turbo. However, on the price, I think they're trying to undercut everybody on the price. The price per tokens on their platform is 28 cents per 1 million tokens. This is haiku level. I think the haiku is like 25. This is 28 cents per 1 million tokens, which is, if you get a model that's GPT-4 level-ish with this price, this is definitely an area where they can play around and like undercut. There's a great semi-analysis blog post that talked about this as well that I link in the show notes. And semi-analysis, I don't know if I can I can find this super quick and pin this to the top of the space as well for you. But they definitely talk about how the folks at DeepSeek, putting aside the challenges with, you cannot prompt this model to ask about Tiananmen Square because of the origins of where it came from. But putting aside this, if you want to use this for like different things, GPT-4 level model from a very cracked team, specifically on coder stuff, for this price is definitely like undercut. Anything else in DeepSeek besides the like incredible MOE architecture? It's cheap to run as well, not locally on your Mac, right? We've talked about this before. Big MOE models are not very simple to run on our Macs, but they are in production because of different things. And Nista, you mentioned even on CPUs as well. So I think that's what they're targeting. And it looks like DeepSeek beat on kind of the scale of active parameters and performance on MMLU. They're beating like Databricks, they're beating Mixtral as well. And yeah, Ryan, go ahead, please, if you have comments about DeepSeek.
Yeah, morning, everybody. So in case everybody isn't aware, you can actually try it just on the web interface. If you go to chat.deepseek.com, they've got the V2 model that you can give it a whirl. just through an interface on the web. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Did you try it? What was your take on it?
The vibes seem good in general. I can't tell whether it's way better or way worse. It just performs as expected, I'd say.
Yeah, which then multiplied by the kind of the insane price they're trying to undercut on their API platform is actually very impressive. 28 cents per million tokens is insane. And I think they don't do. I think I'm trying to see if I glanced and know this because I don't have this in my note, but I think they don't do input and output tokens. I think this is like the 28 cents is 4 million input and output tokens. I think they unified this, which is also something that's new. The context window is different for the online service and the open source model. So 128,000, I should say, tokens in the context window for the open source model, but only 32K for the online service. And it's really specializes in math and code, and DeepSeek Coder is still like one of the best tools. Nissan, go ahead and we'll move on.
You know, just the major achievement that they've done here is that it's 10 times less context. So if normally it took you like 12 extra gigs or 100 gigs of RAM to run 128K, with this one is going to take you like 5. And I'm not too sure how they're doing that, but that's a big part of its speed. And I quickly wanted to say that while it was good and the architecture enables a much wider search space, so it's like more creative, it did also feel light. So it did hallucinate on certain things, not much, but it did still feel like a light model. That's the only small criticism, but again, I've used it very little. But again, given the performance, how much chip it uses versus like how much energy it burns, how much chip it burns versus how much it gives you back, it's probably the best one right now.
Yeah, probably the best one right now. I will also mention like this one thing. It cost them 1/5 of the compute for Meta Llama 370B, and it comes fairly close to 70B. It's obviously it's harder to run locally for us, but like for companies that they're able to run these, the cost compute for this is 1/5 of the cost of Meta, which is crazy. All right, so moving on, we're briefly gonna cover. I'm just not gonna take questions from this. Just like briefly gonna cover XLSTM from Sepp Hochreiter, a researcher that released LSTM back in the 90s, I think. He's the pioneer of deep learning, basically, and LSTM has been around for a long time. They released a new version of LSTM called XLSTM. LSTM stands for long short-term memory, and XLSTM stands for extended long short-term memory. They released a paper that is trying to bring LSTMs that are 30 years old into kind of the new era, where transformers basically overtook LSTM because of the ability to be parallel and execute in parallel. And now they're trying to bring some of that using some techniques and combining some techniques from before. This is a new thing, and we haven't yet seen this like in scale. Nobody trained. So if you guys follow the podcast or you're looking around, you know that we've talked about Mamba and Hyena and RWKV and different RNN-based models that are trying to outperform transformers basically in architecture. So this is potentially another one. I've seen some critique specifically from Armen Aghajanian from, I think, Meta and Fair about the fact that the graph that they released from LXTM doesn't include the flops or the compute. So the graph is not compute controlled when the graph they compare to Mamba and Llama, etc. So we're still waiting to see if this is a very interesting architecture that can actually beat transformers or not. But it's definitely very exciting in the world of folks who, it's 30 years. So many folks like build their careers like learning what LSTM is and have been waiting for its day in the sun. So if that's some stuff that are interesting to you, check out XLSTM definitely. But moving forward, I want to also mention, and this one I will definitely have space to talk about. Yeah, listen, just a quick thing on LXTM if you want, and then we'll talk about the Llama merge.
No, I didn't have. I wish Jan was here for that because he's a big fan of RL and has been doing it for years. I just also quickly wanted to. There's some breaking news that just came out 40 minutes ago, and Alignment Lab just released a 31 million row data set for reinforcement learning and fine tuning, and there's also a model. This is more interesting to those that make models, but also a model for generating data sets and for cleaning up data. So I've posted that above. It's on Hugging Face. You can download it now and stuff. And I wish he was here, but he's also been working with me on Lama, and I can tell you he's not had any sleep this week, of all people. So yeah, check out the data set and the tool model that Alignment Lab releases part of HTT.
Absolutely. Alignment Lab also told me that he hasn't slept for 72 hours. And he already asked me before we started, how was ThursdAI? So yeah, he's a little bit, but yeah, the release is awesome. There's 3 million samples for this data set. And that's crazy.
No, it's 31 million. That was a typo from lack of sleep. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's gigs. Yeah.
Shout out to Alignment Labs. This is definitely awesome. Folks, so we're moving on to talk about Llama 3. And we've been talking about Llama 3 pretty much every week it came out. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to shout out that Llama 3 hackathon, the first hackathon with Llama 3, is happening this Saturday in San Francisco. Cerebral Valley is hosting this. We as the Weights and Biases, but also ThursdAI, we're sponsoring the hackathon alongside with a bunch of very awesome sponsors. I think Lambda is there, and AWS, and obviously Olama is trying to sponsor every Llama-related hackathon. So it's very awesome. And if you are there and participate, I think it's waitlisted at this point, but you can still apply. If you're there, I would love to just come and say hi. I'm also a judge at this hackathon, and I'm very excited to present some of the stuff about the Weave stuff we've talked about. And Llama 3 still, I think the best fine tunes are from Maziar Panahi that we mentioned last week. So no new changes in like the best fine tunes there. We also covered that our friends at News Research released their Hermes Pro on top of Llama 3. But this week we saw a new type of thing, which I was waiting to see from our friend Maxime Lebon. And if you don't know what merges are, ThursdAI conversation with Maxime Lebon from, I want to say, a few months ago is I'll definitely recommend you go and listen to that, because merging is a very interesting technique using open source software from RCAI called MergeKit. Basically, adding layers to a model and making it like perform better. And so in this case, we have Llama 3 120B, 120, right? So it's the 70 billion parameter Llama 3 that Maxime added like 50 layers to create a 120B chunker Llama 3. And that model is very interesting. Wolfram, do you have any comments on 120B?
Okay, yeah, that's my topic, because I did the same. So I merged the Miku model once to 120B, so it was
nice.
70B to 100, and it really improved the model. In my tests, it topped the original, because we all know that the more parameters, the smarter the model. But of course, it is a bit of a magic recipe how you take the different layers and merge them again. So that can totally derail the model as well. And I have to thank Eric Hartford who helped me with that, and also inspired Lebon to do this. So he is involved as well, and the results are excellent. So I have not tested the full version. I can't even run it, but I have tried just a 2.65 bit per bytes model, Excel 2 format of his 120B, and it is really good. It did not ace my test because probably too much loss at that bit per bytes, but it is great model.
Yeah, so I will add a thread from a person, Daniel Kaiser, who has been running this in Q4, so also fairly strongly quantized, and he shout outs that this is the smartest model that he has ever talked to. And I saw Yam, I think, also get like very excited about this. But also when I chatted with Maxime, and Maxime said, hey, this model has some downsides, and one of them is I'm gonna add to the top of the space right now. And I just want to read you like a little piece of this. If you're following along, this is now added to the top of the space from Maxime. It says, goodbye to your RAM with this Llama 3 model. And for illustration, here's my favorite answer from this model from local Llama subreddit where Wolfram posts some of this stuff as well. And basically they ask the brother-sisters question. If you don't know the brother-sister question, it's a very basic like logic question. Samantha has 3 brothers. Each brother has 2 sisters. How many sisters does Samantha have? So basically the answer is also 2 sisters, right? I'm doing the math correctly? Yes, each brother has 2 sisters. No, sorry, it's just It should be 1. See, I'm also confused, but because there's a bunch of iterations of this question, and people switch the numbers out to make sure that the model wasn't trained on some of these questions. Anyway, the model, like if you look at the screenshot, the model starts like doing step by step, and says that this question is trying to trick me or blah blah blah, and then it has a bunch of upper lower how many sisters does Samantha have? It starts to shout and has like all caps in many places, and then it keeps going. And I just love this. I'll read this one thing for you. I'm quoting the output of the model here. And the correct answer is .2 with an exclamation point. Wait, what? No. Samantha has, it literally says in there, Samantha has, and dramatic pause. So all of these things the model puts in there. 2 sisters. No, wait for it. Samantha has, drum roll please, 2 sisters. No. So like the model goes off the rails, but then it ends with this. Fine, I give up. Wait, what am I doing with my life? So this is basically the output of this model, which is fairly crazy if you think about this. And many people are prompting this with like consciousness questions as well. Wolfram, go ahead, because I find it really funny.
Yeah, that is part of when you merge it. It's like taking some brains, chunking them, and smashing them together. So that is what you often see with these mega merges, and they can be really creative and sometimes really brain damaged. So that is very interesting, and yeah, that's one of the symptoms. I also had, when I was using different languages, I had a lot of strange word mixes and stuff that come up with those. So yeah, they get smarter, I think, but they also get damaged in some ways.
Yeah, it's not clear what happens there with the merge. And Maxime told me he chatted with the folks who lead Llama, and they're stumped at why on creative tasks this model performs better, even though there's no additional training. It's just like more layers. It invented one word called prefacate, and then somebody looked up and it's not really a word. But not only it invented the word, which we know happens when these models like quantize to oblivion, but it said, yes, I made up a word. So like, it was the model was aware of the fact that it just gave you a word that doesn't exist. Nistan, go ahead and then we'll move on.
Yeah, what's really surprising about this merge is that when you look at the recipe, which is open source, it's actually a pretty somewhat standard crisscross of it that no one really did. So this was not done in a very like scientific or programmatic way. This was done more as a form of an art. Like we know that crisscrossing 10 layers or 20 layers at a time works pretty well. And it just happened to be pretty good. So the reason that this works overall is the model has about 80 layers, and then the last layer, the output, decides which token it finally is. So what you do with the merges is, in this case, it's 140 layers. So a lot of the in-between layers are repeated. So you take layer 10 to 30, and then you repeat layers 20 to 40, and so on. So each layer now, because it gets repeated, it gets to chew on the information longer. And the way that happens can end up with a much more intelligent model. And this has happened before with the Solar team used it, and the Miku used it, etc. Yeah, to conclude, there is a lot more to be explored in what you can do with merges, and it's pretty exciting that this result came out. And it's only because it's open source and easily downloadable, because otherwise people would have just made another merge and no one would have really tested it. But because there's a whole community that just plays around with this stuff, they were able to find out, oh no, this is actually crazy good, and not even the Meta themselves knew it. Yeah, it's a very interesting discovery.
By crazy good, I find it funny because like in this specific case, you also potentially mean a little crazy as well. But it's really fun to see and play around with, definitely. If you have the ability to run this and in any type of non-quantized version, please let us know. I would like to see this model run in like full precision as well. One last thing in open source before we switch over and talk about AlphaFold, and we have a new friend here that I'll quickly introduce to talk about AlphaFold as well. There's a new open source thing that's popping off on GitHub, and it's called OpenUI. It's built by Chris Van Pelt, who is going to join the show in 30 minutes, and we're going to talk about a little bit of a deep dive into OpenUI. OpenUI is basically a side project that Chris built that's now, I think, took place number 2 on Product Hunt a while ago, and now Matthew Berman, shout out to Matthew Berman, the YouTuber, did a video on this, and now it's trending number 1 on TypeScript GitHub repos. OpenUI lets you build a UI using just your words or vision models like GPT-4. You can paste a thing. It's basically very close to V0 from Vercel, if you've ever used that, but open source and yours, and you can download and do it with it what you will. The cool thing about this is that you can also share the websites or the components that it's built for you. And so I really strongly recommend you check out OpenUI, especially before our conversation with Chris. Just want to say bye to Ryan. Ryan, thanks for hopping on. And yeah, go ahead.
I have to say thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Folks, definitely give Ryan a follow. He runs 3 AI spaces. I don't know how he does this a week. I run one. It's like way too much for me. But Ryan has like awesome shows as well. Definitely give Ryan a follow and join those conversations as well. Definitely awesome to have you here as well. OpenUI, we're going to have a conversation with Chris later. And then I think it's time for us to move to the big companies because now we want to talk about AlphaFold. And I'm going to add, we have Tanishq here and we also have Parm. Tanishq, welcome. Feel free to unmute and introduce yourself to the folks who don't know who you are, although frequent listeners already know who you are.
Hi, I'm Tanishq. I work on medical AI research. Yeah.
Are you in Vienna right now?
No, I'm not. I wish I was. One of my colleagues is actually. But
oh, nice. Okay.
No, I'm not right now.
Yeah, so there's like an international conference, which I think some of the speakers previously were in. So folks who are listening to this, there's quite a few folks in there. But some of us did not get to go to Europe and have fun with the rest of them. Tanishq, I'm right there with you, a bunch of our colleagues. And I think Chris will join from Vienna as well. What is happening with DeepMind and AlphaFold 3? Can you give us a little bit brief recap of what we see? I think you had a great thread that I'm going to also post for folks in show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. So overall, I'd say just at a high level, Google DeepMind has been doing a lot of really good biomedical AI research recently. So yeah, they published MedGemini and those papers as well, which has been quite interesting. But then yesterday they published the AlphaFold 3 paper, which which was accepted in Nature. But basically, AlphaFold 2, which we all know is like a big moment for the BioML community, that's able to predict the protein structure of basically of various proteins. But like the main limitation of AlphaFold 2 was that it was only able to predict of just the proteins by themselves. And in reality, like in biology, actually proteins are interacting with all kinds of other molecules. They're interacting with DNA, RNA, they have various modifications to them. All of this is able to be predicted by AlphaFold 2. AlphaFold 2 was just limited to predicting just the proteins by themselves. So it was quite limiting. And for example, in drug discovery, you would want to know how proteins would interact with different drugs or different other molecules and what those sorts of conformations and structures would look like. And AlphaFold 2 wouldn't be able to do any of that. So AlphaFold 3 was able to generalize beyond what AlphaFold 2 was able to do. In terms of the architecture, there are a lot of similarities actually between AlphaFold 2 and AlphaFold 3, but AlphaFold 3 is able to just take in like general molecules as opposed to just proteins and predict the structure. And on top of that, AlphaFold 3 is a diffusion model, which as someone who works on diffusion models.
About that part specifically, I want to just acknowledge that Parm is also on stage here. Parm, you had a space that's run very well about AlphaFold as well. I see your hand raised up. This is your first time, I think, on ThursdAI. Feel free to unmute and introduce yourself and chime in on this discussion super quick, and then we'll get to the diffusion stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. I've been following ThursdAI for a while. I was like AlphaFold 3 came out. I also have a thread about it. It's a little bit more about the biology aspect. So it's similar to Tanishq, but it goes more into the intro kind of biology involved here. Yeah, I shared that. It has a couple of videos where it basically shows how a structure changes when you have nucleic acids involved, ions involved. And I would love to hear Tanishq talk a little bit more about the diffusion aspect. But I just wanted to say that one limitation of AlphaFold 3 is obviously that they give you 5,000 token at most, and it's within the server. What that causes is it's actually very hard to come up with something that would fit in 5,000 tokens that I would personally be interested in. I'm interested in nucleic acid research. And so what I came to realize was that essentially AlphaFold 3 is doing a fantastic job with small molecules, but with larger molecules, and when you look at specific organelles like the nucleus, it's very hard to tell how well it is doing. The only benchmark that it has is the paper that came out that's transformer based called Rosetta Fold NA, which is like for nucleic acids and protein interactions. So it's very hard to tell until we're able to get a little bit more details about the benchmarks, how exactly it does beyond the use cases that themselves have been covered
in the
on
paper.
the server.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The server, I just, before we get to Tanishq, I want to mention, you mentioned the server. They released together with this paper and the work, and they released a server that you can actually go and use as it's a free research tool for scientists. And you're saying there's like a limit, like a 5,000 token limit in there?
Yes. But I saw a couple of features on there, like methylation and hydroxymethylation. These are things that I work with in the lab very intimately. And we know absolutely nothing about how the structure of DNA is affected by some of these modifications. I do find it interesting. I wanted to pass over the mic to Tanishq, of course, but I do want to say that in some ways it is highly ambitious. And it's a little bit, to me, dangerous to say that it's modeling the entire cell, which is like what everyone is saying. I really think that's not accurate yet.
Awesome. So thanks for this input. Absolutely. Way more detailed than I even am able to understand about this, but I appreciate your expertise in this. Tanishq, let's talk about the diffusion stuff, because this is your area as well. Your MEDARC is part of stability, and obviously stable diffusion is something you also worked at transformer diffusion, right? Like the hourglass transformer diffusion we had a conversation about, which is now in ICLR, I believe. What are they doing there with diffusion and why it's exciting?
Yeah, I think it's exciting because basically in AlphaFold 3, they have this diffusion model, and it's like a very simple diffusion model. Like there are a lot of papers that try to explore how to use diffusion models for these sorts of things, and they come up with various complicated architectures and things like this. But this is literally just, so you have the atoms in your structure, right? And they have the physical coordinates of those atoms. And basically you have a diffusion model that's literally just predicting those coordinates or generating kind of those coordinates. And it's extremely simple, which has its limitations, of course, but at the same time, I'm just impressed that such a simple method works so well. But yeah, I mean, it's like a very standard diffusion model at the end of the day, which I think is quite interesting, I would say.
The previous, in version 2, they did not use any diffusion stuff. They just, how did they get to the 3D structure eventually? Because I think what's interesting here is that the input here, and maybe you can speak more about this for folks to just figure out and visualize what's happening. The input is sequences of amino acids, or basically texts and different things. But then on the output after diffusion, they start with noise, and they denoise and denoise, similar to like stable diffusion, right? But then they get like a 3D structure of these models, which is crazy.
Right. Yeah. So this is like a change from like the previous method, because this is like it's a generative approach. The previous method was more just a predictive approach. And then on top of that, that comes with its advantages, but of course it also comes with its disadvantages. So for example, they talk a little bit about how there's hallucinations that can be generated by the diffusion model. Just like you have hallucinations in text image models, there are also hallucinations with the AlphaFold 3 diffusion model. So it comes with its disadvantages too, but it's just a much simpler approach. And then on top of that, they talk about the hallucinations. I think one thing that was interesting specifically about the hallucinations was the fact that they were like, okay, how do we solve this, or how do we improve upon this because of the hallucinations? They talked about actually training on AlphaFold 2 outputs. So there's actually some distillation that's happening here as well, where they actually train on the predictions from AlphaFold 2 as well. So I thought that was also interesting as well, that they're using the previous approach to improve and get better results. So that's another something else I wanted to point out as well, which I don't think many people were talking about.
So they're using the outputs of the previous model to improve the next models, kind of synthetic data. Tanishq, thank you. Parmita, thank you for this like in-depth AlphaFold. And if you guys want to follow more, definitely I saw both these folks have incredible depth in there. Tanishq, you want to finish on something? We'll have to move on to talk about OpenAI. But if you want to like last point, feel free. And if you want to mention Lucid Brains as well, feel free.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, of course, with AlphaFold 3, right now it's closed source. They just have the server, which I'm a little bit sad about that because I think with AlphaFold 2 being open source, that led to a lot of impact and a lot of different interesting use cases and exploration. But luckily, people are working on open source versions. So like Lucid Brains started working on one, and he's amazing at this. And he actually worked on developing an open source AlphaFold 2. And there are other folks too that are working on this. So really excited, and hopefully within a few months we'll see an open source AlphaFold 3, and hopefully that will have a lot of impact in the community.
Yeah, Lucid Brains is somebody that the community likes, so definitely follow that effort. Other efforts I would be skeptical of a little bit. Without saying more, let's move on.
Yes.
Definitely some folks are just jumping on like the excitement and just like putting out some stuff. Let's move on to talk about OpenAI here. Let's talk about OpenAI. OpenAI had a big week, and I think it's going to get bigger, but like definitely big week. So let's talk about the first thing is 2 new models on LMsys Arena popped up. As folks at Reddit noticed, there's the im-a-good-gpt2 chatbot, and there's an additional one that's called I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot. So the start of this was Sam Altman just tweeting out I'm a good GPT-2 chatbot, basically confirming that the previous GPT-2 chatbot was from OpenAI. We knew about this because folks did like a tokenizer test, so they tested the GPT-4 tokenizer. There's a few tokens that only GPT-4 models or GPT-4 like OpenAI models respond to in a specific way. And so we had a kind of confirmation that like the GPT-2 chatbot that previously LMsys had was from OpenAI, but now like Sam Altman basically confirmed it as well. And also there's errors that showed if some folks like overused it on LMsys, the error shows, hey, talk to your OpenAI representative to get some more tokens. So we know that this is from OpenAI. Now the next question is, what is the test and what are these models? Is this like GPT 4.5? Is this GPT 5? Whatever. People don't know, and everybody's like speculating, but basically if you go and you cannot use these models directly, you have to go to the arena mode, and you can only like basically randomly get them, and some folks are lucky enough to get both of them side by side to compare between the two, but also many folks just comparing them to Llama 3 or basically GPT-4 as well. What's our take on these models so far? As far as I've seen, let's call one GPT-2 and the other one I'm also, just to not to have to say all of the name again. So the I'm also seems to be the slower model that's better, and folks are comparing this to Claude Opus and even saying that it's better than Claude Opus and the standard GPT-4. So we're potentially playing with a model that significantly outperforms what we currently have access to. It's very hard, and Wolfram, I would love your ask on, to talk about this briefly, because you mentioned this about GPT-2 as well. It's really hard to evaluate this because we don't have like API access. We can play and run like most of our prompts. So folks are basically doing some logic stuff, and it's really good at logic stuff. I've seen some folks talk about languages. I've basically definitely tested it with Russian and Hebrew languages that I know it outperforms even GPT-4 Turbo. What's your take on this, Wolfram? And maybe Nistan, if you have a take on this as well, on the 2 new models from OpenAI.
I agree with that. So what I have seen of it, I have not personally tested it, but I've read about it a lot, and they are really good, but they are not as good that you could say, maybe it is definitely GPT-5. So I don't think it's that, and maybe it's for 5, which is, they probably have various versions and checking which it is, or maybe because it's called GPT-2, it could also be a different architecture, maybe even a smaller model quantized or something. And that would be a real shocker if they show that it is better than all the big models and it has much less parameters. So that's all speculation, of course, but I think we will be seeing results soon, because it has been awfully quiet from them. And the news were all about Llama 3, and the other models have catched up. I guess they have to deliver, and that is a good move. I think their PR move is pretty good.
It is a good PR move. I agree.
It
is a good PR move. It's also, there's a whole conversation about LMsys as the place that evaluates models and we trust. And obviously we mentioned LMsys here. every week from week to week. And here there's like a good way for them to test these out outside of the red team and outside of the contractors with actual real life scenarios as well. And so they're putting these models to the test as well. Nistan, any thoughts on any of those two and the summary of the zeitgeist of the conversation about them?
Yeah, you're gonna love when they announce and then we're all wrong, but let's make the speculations anyway. I think I'm just gonna gamble on this. I think im-a-good-gpt2 chatbot is more like GPT 4.5, and the other one, I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot. That's more, it just feels lighter, hallucinates a lot more. Yeah, they do suggest better code and stuff, especially the first one, but they're not that impressive. Like at best, this is like the 4.5, but we're not blown away by this. Like they're okay. It would be very impressive if this is a completely new tiny architecture that does also feel like it's still GPT-4. That would be very impressive. But as far as overall, this doesn't give us much newer capabilities other than slightly more creative coding.
Creative and languages as well. It feels like a little bit better as well. ATAPI, welcome to the stage. You've been here a couple of times before. Do you have a comment about like OpenAI testing out these models?
Yeah, so I don't know if last week's model was the same as this week's model. So that's one thing. I don't know if the good GPT-2 chatbot last week was the same as this week. This week's the two models, just getting confirmation itself that they're actually OpenAI. I only really believed it once the error rate, the error
message
rate
showed up.
Yeah. Before that, I was like, it's still unconfirmed. The tokenizer doesn't mean anything. Other people could use the same tokenizer, so I was still unconfirmed. So only after I saw the error message, the rate limit, I was like, all right, then it's confirmed. And then on capability, I think I'm with Nistan here. They're not that capable. So if it is like GPT-5 level, I think it's a disappointment. My sense overall is that Sam keeps saying that they can predict the level of intelligence that they need, that they have in the model. And my sense is that they just release models which are like 10 to 20% consistently more capable than whatever is currently leading. And they just try to keep slightly ahead. And so they have like multiple versions. So I'm guessing like they tested last week's version and it wasn't quite up to where they were, where they wanted it to be in terms of versus the other people in the field. And so they're testing like two more this week, and then one of those might be a release candidate for next week. So let's see.
About that next week, I think it's only speculation, but we know the Google I.O. is coming out, and shout out to Logan who invited me. I'm going to be there. I'm going to report live from Google I.O. And we know that the Google I.O. is going to be focused very strongly on AI. Obviously, last time Google I.O., I think people counted the number of times like Sundar Pichai basically said AI, which is very funny. So this one, we're going to have an insane amount because Google has been very quiet besides AlphaFold, which is from DeepMind, but also from Isomorphic Labs, right? So Google otherwise has been like fairly quiet in the releases lately. So we're going to see a bunch of stuff. And the speculation is OpenAI is not just going to let them have their day in the sun, because the day that Gemini 1.5 with 1 million token was released, Sora was announced as well. And then when they announced some other updates, OpenAI also released something. So there is definitely potentially a competition between those two. So the speculation is that ATAPI is referring to is OpenAI is going to release something. Yeah. So I will say that this basically covers the kind of the two new chatbots. We'll see. Potentially, this is like a release candidate of what's supposedly gonna come soon, hopefully. OpenAI also joined the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. You guys remember this? We've talked about this. They started talking about implementing some metadata into DALL-E outputs, and now they also said that they're going to integrate this into Sora outputs and also the voice engine thing that they have but didn't release publicly, but some companies use. So basically, watermarking images, audio, and video to be able to actually understand whether or not those AI generated. We've talked about the problems with this approach because metadata can be stripped. For example, any image you upload to Twitter, they strip metadata by default, right? So even as little as that could trick something. But they also announced a classifier, which I think is very interesting as an approach. They said that their classifier now gets up to 96% accuracy on images that were generated with DALL-E. So if an image was generated with DALL-E specifically, they don't mention Midjourney, they don't mention Stable Diffusion, specifically only DALL-E. They get like their classifier to get 96% accuracy. And then they also show different like recompression reduces the accuracy a little bit, but stuff like adding some noise significantly decreases this capability. So it's basically, they're also joining in coalition with other companies. They're trying to make sure that content provenance, i.e. where the content came from, and authenticity is a tractable problem. I don't know if it is. We still don't know how big of a problem space this is, because obviously even another AI can just run through and have pretty much the same image, but looking a little bit different enough to maybe thwart this. They're also joining Microsoft in launching a societal resilience fund. That's only $2 million, which is nothing, but supporting AI education and understanding, which is for older folks to actually know that you shouldn't trust everything you see in here because of the deepfake is coming. And I think this is some relation to lip service around election year and deepfakes, etc. But I also think it's very important that we actually start developing these tools. So the classifier is very interesting. I don't think we got access to it, but very interesting from OpenAI. And I think last thing is the spec. And Wolfram, I saw your excitement about talking about the spec, so feel free to open this up and tell us about what the spec means and what's interesting about it.
Yeah, so the first thing is that they actually opened up the spec and showed it to people. That is an open move from OpenAI, so I appreciate that a lot, that they want actual conversation about it. And I think it may be inspired, or at least goes in the direction that Claude did with the constitution principles. So you don't have fixed do and don't rules, but it's more about principles to follow. And in the end, it's basically don't be evil. So that is something most people can agree. And I think it's a great thing that they have split up the system role. So we had a system role that tells what the model has to do, and then the user comes and says something. And it was always a bit antagonistic because the system rule sets all the rules and the user maybe tries to jailbreak it or something like that. But when you use AI more for actual users, when it gets information from the internet or out of your rack, you can't trust the content that gets in, and it usually goes into the system message. So they have now the tool role where you get the information from the tool. You have the platform role, which is OpenAI itself. So they set the ground rules and they set some defaults, and you as a developer of an AI app, you can take over with the developer role and reconfigure those defaults, which is a really good thing. And they call it a chain of commands, where you have some roles like the platform from OpenAI, the developer, and the user. And the defaults can be overwritten, and you can configure how you override it. So that's a good thing, I think. And security, they take it seriously, because I always had problems with Packer and Vicuna, where you have Markdown, for example, and you can't differentiate what is information that comes from the model or from the developer and what has been inserted. Security is an important point, which makes it much more useful in the future. And as a number one in AI, they obviously have dealt a lot with prompt injection attacks and stuff like that.
Yep.
So their expertise is important.
So
putting that out.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yes?
Finish up.
Putting that out is a great thing. And they also have some assumptions like assume best intentions from the user, developer, ask clarifying questions. So those are hard problems you usually have, because if you give an input and you get an output, maybe that output is not what it would be if it asked for clarification or stuff like that. But if it's automatic, it can't ask for clarification. Maybe it hallucinates. So they have thought about a lot of things that will solve actual problems in real users. A lot more than just a chatbot. So
Absolutely.
That is where they are moving.
The Anthropic has a similar thing called Constitution AI. For OpenAI, this is new and very welcome to explain to us how they build these models. And they're actually asking for feedback. If you go to the blog post, and we'll add this to the show notes, they're actually asking for feedback. So Wolfram, whatever you told us, please tell them as well that you appreciate some stuff. The rebranding of the chain of command thing that they call, now platform is messages by OpenAI. Developer, previously formerly system, is now like the developer, application developer, and user is like what the user inputs. I think it's very important to highlight that they're focusing the model's understanding of this chain of command, because they really want to make these models better in production. So I think we'll cover this a little bit more, but now we have our guest speakers, which I want to get to, because I know in the interest of time, we want to cover some more. Hey everyone, you're on ThursdAI for May 9th. This is the second hour of the space. We previously had a great conversation about AlphaFold and open source, and we had the two core developers from Open Devin talk to us about how they got state-of-the-art achievement on SWE-Bench, which is a very hard benchmark for agents. And now, on the second hour, I want to just reintroduce myself in the space. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with Weights and Biases. If you're just joining us, feel free to help us boost the space by the bottom right corner. There's like a purple pill, and please tell your friends that you're listening to the space. Shout out to the person who is that listening from the plane, Daniel Merria. So shout out to Daniel who's listening to us while flying, which is awesome. I definitely listen to spaces, but I didn't do one from flight, so we'll see. And now we have a special guest here. Chris, this is your first time on ThursdAI since ThursdAI joined Weights and Biases, which you've been a co-founder of for a while. So please feel to unmute and introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about this week's exciting news.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Alex. This is my first Twitter space, actually.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have this a lot. Like I invite people, it's like, oh, this is my first Twitter space experience. So hopefully no technical issues because they are frequent here. But where are you joining us from? And feel free to introduce yourself to some folks as well who don't know you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am actually in Vienna, Austria. I came out to ICLR and getting to meet a lot of fascinating researchers, geeking out on all the latest and greatest in the world of AI. And then I'm headed to London next week for our big conference next Wednesday. So excited to be in Europe. I love Europe.
Yeah, so a shout out to the team that works on our big conference. We had one in San Francisco. Some of you joined there. It's called Fully Connected. And the next week, I think at the time of Google I/O, right? Our conference Fully Connected is in London. So if you're in Europe and you want an excuse to go to London for something, Fully Connected London, our conference, I think is free actually. So you can just come there and listen to like amazing speaks and meet Chris as well. But Chris, this is not the reason. Like promoting the Fully Connected conference is like a nice benefit we get because both of us are here. But this is not the reason why I invited you to speak here. This week, I saw an explosion in popularity and looking at the trending repos on GitHub at number 1 in TypeScript, like number 8 overall, is something called OpenUI. Could you tell us about OpenUI a little bit, what it is and why do you think it's trending?
Sure. So it's a side project of mine. I love making stuff. That is my happy place. I'm a full stack web developer and co-founder of Weights and Biases. And whenever I can, I try to hack on stuff. Over Christmas break, I think, I just had the idea. I wonder if I could ask an LLM to generate UI for me. I was actually working on a new project and I hadn't done a lot of development with Tailwind CSS, which is a really popular kind of styling toolkit. And as I was trying to learn Tailwind CSS, it occurred to me that this is actually like a really good way to express design for an LLM because it's very compact, it's inline, it wouldn't have to have a separate style sheet and then add classes to HTML to make everything styled properly. And it was like, hey, this could be a good way for me to learn maybe the different nuanced ways to leverage Tailwind. Yeah, it was a little side project to basically put a bunch of UI around an LLM that allowed me to ask for different UI components. And I was really impressed by how well it worked. And then I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I'd been playing with Ollama and some of these open source models. I thought, wow, it should be pretty easy for me to hook this up to just being able to run models locally. And eventually I'd like to fine-tune models and do a lot of other interesting stuff with the toolkit. And naming things is really hard. Originally I was going to call it LMint. You're minting elements, but I just didn't like that name enough. And then I thought, wait, OpenUI, I like that name. Maybe I can ride on the coattails of OpenAI's success a little bit. But yeah, I've been blown away by the community's response to the project. And I think we've got about 12,000 stars today, it's just nuts. It's been really cool to see some contributions from the community and folks sending comments, and yeah, it's been awesome.
It's been nuts, absolutely. I remember I went out, I don't remember which occasion, but I was in San Francisco. We went for a drink after work, the 6 of us, and then you introduced this, and I did not connect with me that this is going to blow up and everybody's going to use this because there is a product out there, at least from a big company, right? Vercel, I think, has V0 that they've been like slowly opening up that they build elements with. Did this inspire you at all? Or did you just, because you did mention them on the README.
Yeah, I actually found V0 after I had started the project. So I'd been working on it for a couple of weeks and I've been thinking different interactions. Like I have this kind of magic wand tool where you can hover over different elements in the generated HTML, select it, and then ask for changes to be applied to that specific element. And I had actually reached that UI conclusion before I found v0.dev, and then played with v0.dev and saw that they had that same feature. And v0.dev is it's a nicely polished toolkit. They did do a slightly different approach. They're generating React based on top of the shadcn component library, which is a super cool library that I actually used for the OpenUI application itself. But it's maybe a little less flexible than just raw Tailwind HTML. But yeah, I was both flattered and a little bummed when I found v0. You always think, oh, I was the one who had this like great idea, but I think we'll probably see some more startups that are doing this a lot better than I've done it. I think it's pretty powerful and should likely only get more and more powerful. And I also think there's like really cool things we can do with fine tuning and getting it to be a little more creative and funky and different styles and whatnot.
I definitely want to get to the fine-tuning point next, but I just want to describe to the folks who haven't tried this before, and you can try this. Chris is eating the cost for you to try this. It's an openui.fly.dev, and we'll add this to the show notes as well, but definitely you can try this right now as we're speaking. Basically, this is an interface very similar to ChatGPT, but on the middle of it is not just text. You can actually see the HTML that's rendered in real time, and on the left you have like your chats. You can select a model. I think the default one is 3.5 turbo, Chris, or 4. I'm not sure what the default one is, unless you use...
Yeah, for cost savings, they default to 3.5 turbo, but you can use 4. In practice, I haven't seen a meaningful difference in the initial generations.
Really?
You can also you can upload a screenshot, which needs to use GPT-4 Turbo for the vision capability, and that's pretty cool. It actually is able to replicate existing UIs pretty darn well, which blows my mind that works, but...
Yeah, I remember a year ago when they announced GPT-4, Greg Bachman actually did like a napkin sketch of a website and then fed it to GPT-4 Vision. And then for, 6 months, Nisna? I think we've been waiting for Vision to get released to us, but we know that this capability exists. But then implementing this into different websites or different actually tools is something that was missing. And now there's an open source version that you guys can do it. But I just want to hark on some of the features, Chris, that you mentioned. So first of all, Vision, you can upload a screenshot and define it. Then you have this like similar to like you call it magic, like very similar to like inspect element tool, where you click it on the top and you can select a specific element and make changes to that specifically. You also added responsive views, because why not? Everybody likes responsive, and I think Tailwind is by default responsive as well. Dark mode, some people say...
yeah, I always tend to get a bad case of featureitis with these things. I need to step back and say what's really important. But a lot of those features, like the sharing feature and the login, those were like the last features I added, because I thought I could release this thing just as an open source repository that people could run themselves and supply their own OpenAI key to. But then I thought, will people even take the time to do that? Like, it's magical when you're able to converse with this thing and see UI in real time be displayed to you. So I wanted to give people the opportunity to experience that. And the way I implemented the actual backend is it's essentially just a proxy to the OpenAI API. So I'm exposing an OpenAI API on the internet, which would be a bad idea if I didn't have login. So I knew I needed to put some limits as to how many calls an individual can make, and put some kind of gating factor where, I'm sure someone could go out there now that I'm telling people about this on Twitter Spaces and create a farm of GitHub accounts and then really abuse the API. But so far, given we're using GPT 3.5 Turbo, the cost have actually been fairly reasonable. And then the sharing piece was, it was like, hey, I think Lucas, my co-founder, was playing with it. It's like, how do I share something? I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. And that was like a 30-minute whip something together, just like store a JSON file in an S3 bucket and then add a new route to the backend API.
Yeah, that's great. I would love sharing as an HTML file as well. That would be dope. My one thing is that I built an invite for this space with you, like your face and my face. I did a video about me using OpenUI as we're going to talk about OpenUI, and then the button didn't work because of the way the iPhone works. Anyway, looking forward.
Feature request, it should be easy. It's like another 30 minutes. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Feature request aside, you talked about fine tuning and talked about different models as well. Let's talk about Olama a little bit, because I think for many folks, the excitement about something like this is that it can fully run locally. And now we have like vision models like Lava and Llama runs like a bunch of vision models as well locally. How are you seeing like this being used with local models versus something like GPT-4 that's like expensive maybe for some folks, but definitely very good at this?
Yeah, I will say the models as a service they're just going to be a better experience, right? They're going to be faster. I think one of the most common feature requests in the GitHub repo right now is to add Grok, the really fast Grok, not
Grok with a Q, yeah,
the snarky Twitter Grok. I think I'm going to add support for more services, but the cool thing about Llama is it just feels like so open source, right? It feels like so powerful that you can have all of this locally on your machine and hack with it. And then I think if I can make the process of fine-tuning work well, it will open up a whole new audience of developers to the possibility of being able to like further customize these fairly small models that are maybe less capable than the larger ones, but with fine-tuning can start to approach similar results for a targeted application like this. I will say running Llama, it's a little tricky. Like I have a Docker Compose file so you can run in Docker, but then you're going to get no acceleration in that case, unless you happen to be running on a Linux box with NVIDIA and you set up those drivers, which is like non-trivial. I run it locally on my MacBook. I've got like an M1 Max, and it's pretty snappy.
Mm-hmm.
I've been impressed. I went to an Llama meetup a couple weeks ago in San Francisco, and it was such a cool meetup. Just the energy in that space. It felt like the early days of Ruby on Rails, where I kicked off my career. Just everyone like really excited to make cool stuff. So I'm a big proponent of that community and can't wait to see what else comes out of it.
A lot of this, absolutely, like Llama, and we also have LM Studio, which I should introduce you to because they also expose a local server, and integrating with them will also be cool. They also have an interface to download models. Running these things locally, but also running them with vision, I think is potentially the next step. So folks who are listening to this and who are into submitting some pull requests, please do, because like vision models like Lava and different things are also running locally now with good fidelity. We had Vic from Moondream, a very small vision model that runs and understands UI as well. I heard some news from Lava folks that I can't talk about right now, but probably tomorrow they're going to drop something. Very high performant, like local models that potentially get up to GPT-4V level. Chris, I want to talk about evaluation and plug at least a little bit. And Nistan, we'll get to your question after this, because we have a new tool for LLM AI builders, and basically this application is the epitome of this. You're running prompts on production and your customers kind of use or your users use this. How do you know what's going on? So I've talked about Weave here a little bit. We actually launched Weave with Scott and Tim here on ThursdAI, but folks who don't know Weave is a toolkit from Weights and Biases to do LLM observability and trace, but also do evaluations as well. And Chris, I would love to ask you about how do you use Weave in this? Because you've been working with OpenUI before Weave launch or like during the Weave launch, and then you had to integrate this. Could you speak a little bit about Weave and its use case here?
It's really one of the motivating factors for me building an application like this is where at Weights and Biases, we're in the business of building the best tools for AI developers, and I wanted to kind of experience the pains that an AI developer would experience and see how Weave could help me out. So especially once I hooked up Llama, now I've got tens of different models that I could potentially use with this thing, and I don't have a good way other than vibes to know which ones are actually working well versus any other one. So I knew I wanted to set up some type of automated evaluation process. And when I started thinking about like how would I evaluate a task like this, it wasn't super obvious to me. I thought, okay, I could parse the HTML and then use some kind of like Tailwind linter to at least find out if I had valid Tailwind. But that doesn't really tell me how good the HTML looks. And then I thought maybe I could just ask like GPT-4, how good does the HTML look? But then would it really be able to visualize from the raw HTML? And where I landed was, hey, I should use a vision model. I set up a pipeline where I generate HTML. I then render it in a browser in dark mode, light mode, mobile, desktop, take screenshots of that. Then I send it to GPT-4 Vision with a prompt saying, hey, you're an expert web developer, rate these screenshots on the following criteria and provide your rationale for why you gave these ratings. And I've been like pretty impressed with the results. I'm always hesitant to use an LLM to evaluate another LLM. But my previous company, Crowdflower, we were in the business of having humans label things, and we had to do all sorts of things to ensure the humans understood the sometimes subjective criteria and things like inter-annotator agreement, or putting in what we called gold standard questions where we know the answer. I've tested my evaluation script and have put in purposely bad screenshots for prompts, and it is definitely flagging those as really poor examples. So I think I have meaningful signal there, and I'd love to set up a public evaluation leaderboard for this use case, and also be able to showcase how we were able to use the Weave toolkit and framework to make this really straightforward, because I think this problem really exists in almost all AI applications, where to evaluate your specific application is going to require some real custom logic. You can't just take any old evaluation out there and do it well. It's been really cool to be able to dog food our own tools and make something that the community is really excited about.
Nistan, you had a question to follow up as well. If it's still relevant, feel free. And then we also have some questions from the audience before we let Chris go and do very important Weights and Biases co-founder work.
Yeah, so the main gripes with UI generation before, especially with using Gradio, which they are friends of the pod. However, it does make it difficult when you have a Python environment making Svelte components, and it becomes a bit of a mess. But now looking at your stack, this looks more like a traditional working man's stack, which you can actually work on. Can you go over a little bit as to what made you pick what? So far, I see there's no hard-coded dependencies. It's a pretty standard React Vite with TypeScript and Tailwind. So can you go over a bit of the stack? And my other question would be, if a company or someone else wanted to build their product onto this, what would you recommend they go with next, like maybe a React query or some other state management? So yeah, can you go over a bit, particularly the front end stack, what made you pick what?
Yeah, really, when I first started this, a part of my motivation as well was to use the latest and greatest front end stuff to stay up to date and see what was out there. So I tried implementing it as a Next.js app. I tried Remix. I tried Dino's framework. I forget what it was called. I tried a bunch of these. A lot of those are mixing server-side HTML generation with client-side HTML generation. And when I thought about this application, it's just too complicated. The server-side HTML generation makes sense, especially if you have something you want to be crawlable by search engines, or you have kind of network requests that are happening that are just going to happen way faster on the server as opposed to the client. In this case, it was so dynamic, things needed to all be done in browser. So I just went with the state-of-the-art single-page application stack, which is Vite with some TypeScript. I played a little bit with React Query, but I actually make very few queries to the backend. And the main query that's being made is the streaming query to the OpenAI API, which is its own weird thing that even React Query, I think maybe they support streams in some weird way, but I just use a native browser event source to get the various chunks of HTML. And then the trickiest part here is how do I render the HTML in a way that is secure? I can't just render anything coming out of an LLM on a web domain that I own. I'd be totally exposed to cross-site scripting attacks or potentially nefarious HTML if someone crafted a clever enough query. So I wire everything through an iframe that's on a different domain name, and then I needed to be able to render things in that iframe as the HTML was coming in. So I wanted the least kind of machinery around it as possible. So it's just raw HTML that's being just set, using native DOM methods, just setting the inner HTML. And then I've included the development version of Tailwind CSS, which is, there's overhead there. It's not really production grade, but it allows me to easily compile that Tailwind into styles. And it worked out really well. I'm super happy with it. In terms of state management, I forget the exact tool I use, but it was nice. Yeah, it's fun. I always love playing with the newest, shiniest toys, and I'd love to play more with the Dino framework. Of all of them, that one felt the sleekest and most interesting.
So, yeah, I've used, you mean Fresh, right?
Fresh. That's the one. Their island architecture, yeah.
Yeah, the island and Preact. Yeah, that's where I'm trying to move to next. But overall, I dreaded at first opening this, seeing what was going to be there, because I thought it was going to be another hand-rolled Gradio and Svelte thing. But no, this is an actual regular stack that you can build on. So I would say good job on keeping it that way. And
easy for folks to fork and play around with, definitely. As much
any
Nissan, sorry
React
to interrupt. As much as I, as a former front-end developer, also love this geek out about the specific stack. This is a space about AI, but also I want to be mindful of Chris's time. Chris, do you have 1-2 more minutes? Because we have a question, and if you don't, that's fine. Like, people can follow up and question in chat. Maybe you can follow up. I do want to ask quickly about the fine-tune thing that we didn't get to, because you're now generating quite a lot of information and data, and the fine-tuning can go like several ways. One, better OpenUI itself, but also specific to like company component libraries, for example, right? You can fine-tune a whole component library and then get an OpenUI that's specific for your company and your styles and your use of Tailwind, etc. So how do you think about fine-tune, and when can we hear more about how that's going to look like?
Yeah, I'm totally happy to answer a couple more questions. Got about 5 minutes or so. Fine-tuning, I've experimented a little and I've had mixed results. There's so many ways to footgun yourself with fine-tuning. Like, you've got to get the instruct format right if you're using an instruct model. And I feel like the model still works. It still outputs things, but in my experience, the handful of fine-tuned models I've done so far, I'm not impressed with the results. So I imagine I messed something up somewhere. So I'm still trying to tweak that and iterating. But the approach I'm currently using is there's this library called Flowbyte. It's like an open source component library that's online. Their documentation, it's perfect for generating a fine-tuning data set. They have the name of one of their components and then the actual Tailwind, the raw Tailwind HTML and CSS. So I wrote a little scraper to grab a bunch of those components, and then I also ran those descriptions of the component through an LLM and said, hey, generate like 3 user queries for what someone might ask for if they wanted this thing. And essentially was able to create what I think is a pretty clean data set of actually professionally developed Tailwind components. So that was one approach I'm using. I'm obviously sitting on a big data set. I'd want to probably know a bunch of the components that people have generated with OpenUI to date probably suck. I do have signal in the share button. So like components that people have shared, probably okay. I should probably add like a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the app, because I think there is a meaningful amount of training data there. And then there's other sources out there as well that would be likely scrapable in a way that adheres to robust.txt and the license of the underlying result. One interesting thing I noticed is a lot of these frameworks would have SVGs in them, and LLMs are just not good at generating SVGs. It's like pretty complicated to generate these big complex paths. So I actually did a lot of work to strip the SVGs out and replace them with maybe an image tag that points to an SVG with a descriptive name, and I can have kind of a separate endpoint that returns a reasonably good SVG if the generator wants to do that, and other little things like that. But yeah, it's been fun, and I hope to actually be able to release some fine-tuned models and my thoughts and learnings in the coming weeks.
That's awesome. And I will say, I heard through the grapevine from our mutual folks at Weave that human annotation is coming, like, as a support to Weave as well. We're definitely looking at this use case of folks using your product on production and kind of giving you thumbs up, thumbs down, or even like other signals, like maybe sharing, like you said, to actually improve and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then turn this into data sets for evaluation, and then following that into fine-tuning, for example, to get better models. And then how do you actually know these models are better? I think, Chris, this is like one area you're dealing with and mentioned is, let's say you fine-tune. How do you actually know that it's fine-tuned? You need to, like, do you do vibes only? Do you release this in 20% of production and then try to evaluate and run evals? So evaluation is a big piece of 2024 AI stuff, and we're definitely going to be following up on this. One question we had from a speaker, from an audience, Rami here, feel free to unmute and ask us a question, and then we'll, I think, wrap up this section.
Yo, Chris, I was looking at the OpenUI thing, and I think it's pretty cool, but my big question is, why didn't you choose to go into a direction where Copilot, for example, the GitHub Copilot went with, where it just works with an existing code base, rather than trying to code the whole site? Seems like a huge number of developers already have a lot of workspaces and codes that already exist. And why do you choose a direction where it's no code, fully Webflow? WordPress?
Yeah, great question, Rami. For me, it just felt like easier to implement. I could really envision just a single page web application that you put in a prompt and we generate HTML and render it live. Immediately, I've had users say, oh man, what I really wish is I could open like the Google Chrome Web Inspector, go to some random component, and then chat with it there and say, hey, change this thing to have a bigger padding or a different color or a border. So I could imagine that might be fairly doable with some kind of like Chrome extension. And I've done a little bit of Chrome extension work in the past. Now, there's also what you mentioned, maybe I could just make some VS Code extension. Again, that's something I haven't done a lot of, and I just felt like it would have taken me a little longer to understand all the inner workings of how to hook into those various systems, whereas I know HTML, JavaScript, CSS very well. I'm very comfortable there. I was just trying to work towards my strengths, but I can imagine a number of future versions of this that could be even more powerful with something more Copilot-like.
Awesome. Thanks, Rami, for coming up. And Chris, one last thing before we continue. How can people get involved and what does the future hold for OpenUI?
Yeah, so I'm trying to stay up to date with all the GitHub issues. So if you have ideas, if you have feature requests, let's organize this through GitHub. I've had a couple asks for me to publish a roadmap, so that's on my to-do. I'll probably put it into the GitHub wiki where people can comment and potentially take on bits of work there if they're interested. And you can also reach out to me via email. My email is vanpelt@wnb.com. If you have thoughts or questions or feature requests, hit me up. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter as well. So thanks for having me, Alex. It's been humbling to see how excited people are about this. And I hope I can continue to make it a place that we do interesting stuff with LLMs and can make, a cool tool for people to make neat stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming up. We'll let you go back to your executive duties in Weights and Biases, but I will wrap up and say that, folks, if you haven't tried OpenUI, definitely give it a shot. You don't have to do anything. Take a screenshot of an existing UI. That's what I'm actually doing right now. Just paste it in there and ask for that thing. And you'll see like in front of your eyes a thing being built. If you don't have any web developer skills, this is magical. This is going to blow your mind. If you do have web developer skills, you'll very much appreciate this because it's a pain in the ass, even with Tailwind, to take a design from a designer and kind of start implementing this. So thank you, Chris, for coming up and building OpenUI. And I'm very excited to see like stuff from Weights and Biases blowing up. But I think we have 5 more minutes and we have a few more stuff to talk about. So let's talk about diffusion. AI art, diffusion models, text to video and images, and everything in between. Only on ThursdAI. I don't know about this transition. I think I need to re-record this, but we don't often talk about diffusion, but when we do, I think it's very interesting. ByteDance released a new thing called PULID or PULID, and it's a new high quality ID customization. So basically, if you guys track this whole area of diffusion, like in AI art, a while ago, you could have taken like stable diffusion and used something like Dreambooth to train a whole new big file of a 4 GB file with like your face, and the results will not be like that amazing. And then the next iteration of this was like different LoRa's, so you could train a little bit of a difference file, like a smaller file, and apply that to stable diffusion, something like this. And I think I missed that kind of trend a little bit, but then like a whole area of ID customization came out where they do basically the same thing without a lot of retraining, which is very exciting. And the last one that I just seen, and Nistan, thank you for giving me like putting this on my radar and giving me some attention to this, is from ByteDance. I think it's fairly new as well. I think it's either last week or this week as well. It's called PULID or PULID, which is a tuning-free ID customization approach. So you don't have to actually tune anything, any stable diffusion or other models. You can just literally just like paste an image of your face and then ask the model to generate some stuff for you. And it's very quite incredible. And this week there's also a Comfy UI kind of integration into this.
Unfortunately, I have not kept up to date with that, unfortunately. And yeah, I think I actually missed this paper, so I'm looking at this paper right now. But yeah, there's a lot of new methods out there, but yeah, haven't explored it thoroughly, unfortunately.
Not yet, but you guys should know to follow Tanishq at this point, because if something gets an interest, you'll get a thread that goes very deep. If you want to check this out,
I'll definitely be checking this out now. So yeah.
So the demo is on Hugging Face as well, and it's from ByteDance, and ByteDance released quite a few things recently, including an animation thing as well. On the one side we have like TikTok potentially getting banned. From the other side we have a bunch of folks in ByteDance releasing incredible things as well. I think moving on to voice and audio, which is the last thing that we have to cover here, is that Udio, which we've talked about when it launched, if you guys remember, Udio and Suno are the two kind of competitors in the AI audio space. There's also Stable Audio has one, but Udio and Suno, I think, the more commercial things. Udio has introduced something that I've been waiting for a while, and it's called in-painting. So if you generate a track with Udio, which is, first of all, for free right now, they introduced payment segments, but for now it's for free. You can now pretty much do whatever Chris just told us about with OpenAI, but you can select a piece of song and change the lyrics in there. So if you're also generating the lyrics through this service, then you can change the lyrics to something that fits better, or something that sings a little better. And honestly, it's really hard to describe. You have to watch the video and actually do it once for yourself to see how awesome these tools are getting, right? So in-painting is the name of this feature, and we know from like Stable Diffusion and from DALL-E and from all these tools that do diffusion, in-painting basically masks out a little area of an existing picture and then regenerates like only that section basically. Given that, and I think the Udio uses, actually don't know if they use diffusion, but I think they use diffusion for audio as well. It's very interesting that they're also introducing something like in-painting for audio. And I find it very interesting enough to get excited and tell you about this. So if you ever generated a song with Udio, you can go back and regenerate like a sections of it. For example, you can write a song about something and then change the name to somebody that you know and love, or when you come up with different lyrics. The exciting part about this is because of the iterative approach of creating songs, even with artists as well. So very cool from Udio. Definitely check this out. We covered AI art, and I think that's most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about this week. The last thing that I'll add, a tweet of mine basically, but we've talked about multiple AI hardware devices and AI pins and rabbits, etc. And I've been saying that my AI pin went back to the factory unopened, which is very uncharacteristic, but based on all the reactions, I did not get very excited about this. The rabbit was a different story. One, because getting the rabbit R1, I also got Perplexity for a year, so basically it was worth it just because of that. But also because it's a standalone device. It looks super cool. It's really very shiny. Like, it's hard to describe how shiny this is. But also, I'm trying to think of use cases for a standalone AI device. And so I will add it to the show notes. I took my kids to the museum, and I landed on keeping the rabbit, just because for kids, this is like the perfect AI device. The screen there is not really a screen. They can't like swipe out like they would. I don't want to give them my phone to do the same thing. And also, I literally tried to do the same thing. I tried to point my phone at a museum exhibit and ask ChatGPT with vision. And it's 7 steps. You have to open the camera with like a small button, and then you have to tell it, not with your voice, hey, what is this thing about? So the UX is probably not there for OpenAI's application, where with Rabbit you just hold the thing and say, hey, what is this? So kids can literally just do it. And does it justify the $200 device for you? I don't know. This is not a buying recommendation, but definitely for me, I found like a use case that apps currently probably won't be able to do. And so for that reason, I was like fairly excited to use this, and probably will keep this. For my own personal use, it's been sitting on my desk. I haven't used it. I can just pull up Raycast or one of the LM Studio stuff and just use them. But it was super cool, and I promise you guys a reaction once I do use this. And so this is my reaction as well. I think this is the show. We're exactly 2 hours since we started. With that, I want to just shout out a few things. First of all, thank you to my co-host Nistan. Thank you for being here for over a year, almost every week. I think you missed one and I missed one. Tanishq, it's always awesome to see you here, and more than welcome to come back. Wolfram, Raven Wolf, our reviewer extraordinaire. Like every time that there's a new model, I look forward to Wolfram's reviews on Local Llama, and now here on stage on ThursdAI. So more than welcome to come back. We also had multiple guests of ours here as well. Ryan Carson was here before, and some other folks as well. So shout out to everybody who joins the stage to talk, but also, and probably the biggest shout out is for everybody who listens, who tunes in from week to week to the space. I think we had, I don't know, I think we had 1,000 people in the space by this point today. And also everybody who listens on the podcast every week as you drive around and give us feedback and read the newsletter. It's a pleasure of mine to do this for you every week. I'm really enjoying learning as much to be able to deliver this high signal space. So if you do like this, please share it with your friends. And if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please do subscribe. I do report this to my boss every week. I was like, hey, we grew this much. So please do subscribe to the newsletter. Besides having just show notes and links and everything, you'll be also supporting in that way as well. And with that, I want to tell you an awesome Thursday. And I think that the next week is going to be insane. So if you're in San Francisco this weekend, you're going to be in the hackathon with Llama 3. I'm going to be there as well. And if not, Google I/O is going to be eye-opening, and probably OpenAI is going to release something. We're going to you don't have to follow everything. Our motto is we stay up to date, so you don't have to. So with that, thank you everyone for joining ThursdAI, and look forward for the newsletter to drop in a few hours once I finish editing. Thank you.